Hello, welcome to the Christian Podcast community, and we're excited that you may be considering joining our community. Before we do, however, one thing we'd like to do is let you know what the community is, how it started, why we have created this, and what is the passion behind the Christian Podcast community. One of the things in podcasting that we noticed is that there are several ways to help to promote your podcast. One of the larger ways is to go on other podcasts that are similar and get out there. Either have them promote your podcast, go on as a guest, have some guests onto your podcast that would draw some of their audience to check your podcast out. It is one of the most popular things that people will do to try to build a podcast. However, a lot of times what you find is people are looking to do that, where they're just promoting themselves. And we at the Christian Podcast community actually have this idea that Christians, I know this is going to sound crazy, we think Christians should be promoting others and not self. I know that sounds crazy to some. Why did we start the community? Well, the way we started this was that this is part of a ministry, a larger ministry called Striving for Eternity. Now, Striving for Eternity is a discipleship ministry. And what we seek to do at Striving for Eternity is to disciple people. One of the ways we tried to do this years ago was to basically disciple different people in ministry. And we had someone who was looking to be a podcaster, and he eventually wanted to stay, was part of us. We had to figure out, how do you fit in with discipling? And so we decided we'd create a network of podcasts so that we would be able to basically disciple podcasters was the goal. Problem with a network is a network owns things. They control things. This person ended up wanting to go on his own, and he went off. And because he had the control, he was able to just turn people's feeds off that he didn't like. And they had no control over that. We didn't have contracts. Bad move. So when we had to start over, we decided we'd do things differently. We still at Striving for Eternity want to disciple. That's our goal. But we wanted to make sure that there was protections in place for podcasters that are part of the community. Now, we have to understand there's a difference between a network and a community. It's the same difference that is between a publisher and a platform. See, a publisher, if you think about a book publishing company, they will decide exactly what is said in their books. They own them. That's a network. It owns it. They may require you to play advertisement where they make money. They may require you to do certain things. You may or may not be able to have certain guests on, but they're a network. See, we at the Christian Podcast community see that we're more of a platform. Platform is more of, you think of a radio station. They play different programs and they don't control the content. We don't want to control a podcaster's content. We're not going to require people to play ads. You're not going to have to promote other podcasts in the community that you don't agree with. In other words, we may not all agree on everything, but what we do agree on is the fundamentals of the faith of Christianity. And there we agree. And what we're trying to do is to promote one another where we can, as in many places we can. We've been able to build this idea of a community. So we started over. And we started with this idea of a Christian podcast community where we're working together. The heartbeat of the community is that it's a community. We're all trying to find ways to help one another. There may be certain skills that one person has that someone else doesn't. We have some podcasters that are world-renowned movie producers. We have a couple of them, actually. Some in the secular world, some in the Christian world. Maybe you want to do something with video. Well, we have resources of people you could go to and get help with that. We have one person who is thinking about starting a podcast. He's an attorney, and he said that he'd be willing to give an hour of his time just to give advice. Now, these are the sort of things we look to do. each of us in the community have a different background, and there's areas where we try to help one another to improve each other's podcast. It's really simple. If you're promoting your podcast to your audience, you're going to grow. We can recognize that. But the reality is you're not going to grow as much as if 10 other podcasts are promoting your podcast. You see, if you have 10 other people promoting your podcast, you're going to have a different audience than yours hearing about you. That's what you want. And that's what we try to do with the Christian podcast community. We try to promote each other, try to find ways to work with each other, have each other on our podcasts, listen to each other's podcasts and share them. It is a way we promote one another. And in doing so, we actually see all of our podcasts grow. Now, the thing that we end up doing is we, through that cross promotion, have seen that if you look at statistics and numbers, about 200 downloads per episode puts you in the top 50% of all podcasts. In other words, the majority of podcasts have less than 200. Half of all podcasts have less than 200 downloads per episode. Well, part of the Christian podcast community, I think our smallest that host with us is 200 downloads per episode, and they do no marketing. It's just the power of the community. And that's the thing that we have seen. We've seen people that have been podcasting on their own. They've joined our community and their numbers have some doubled. We have one that his numbers went 10 times as much. Now you say, well, if that's 2 downloads to 20, it's not that much. No, I'm talking some people who went from 300 downloads total after 3 episodes to 1,100 on every episode. So they went from about 100 downloads per episode to 1,100. That's what you could end up seeing. You can end up seeing some big numbers that you can end up having, but it's not about the numbers. It's about us working together for the furthering of the kingdom. That's what we're trying to do. So that's the heartbeat. If you're not interested in promoting others, you're not going to be interested in joining us. You're just not going to want to be part of what we're doing. If you're all about self-promotion, that's fine, but you're not going to fit in well with us. Now, we are a Christian podcast community. In other words, if you have a great show on baseball and it has nothing to do with Christianity, it's not going to fit with the community. We're a Christian community. In other words, we're trying to produce Christian content. One other thing I want you to know before you enter into joining the community is the way that we're laid out. I mentioned earlier, we have protections on your content. When you join the community, whether it is an affiliate or as hosting, and I'm going to explain those, you have a contract that you sign. You sign it and we sign it. That contract makes it clear you own your content. You own your RSS feed. Even if you're hosted with us, the contract is clear that you own it. So if anything happens and there's a disagreement, maybe someone needs to leave the community, we have a contractual obligation to make sure we help you move off and that you get your content and you get your RSS feed and you don't have the worry of having that risk. One of the things we always say if you listen to our So You Want to Be a Podcaster podcast, which if you're new to podcasting, you want to listen to that. That's our podcast for podcasters for our community. And if you listen, we always say you make sure you own your content, your feed. If you don't own it, someone can destroy it, and you don't want that. So what we want you to think about is that if you want to join us, know that you have protections. Now, there is a process to join. The process starts with the initial application where it's an inquiry form. It gives the administrators of the Christian podcast community a chance to listen to some of your episodes, to check out some of your social media, to see whether we think you'd be a good fit. There's many that don't make it past that first stage. In fact, that's why we don't have a long form for you to fill out. We don't want you filling out a bunch of stuff if we recognize it's not going to fit. We reject more than half of the people that are accepted. And as of the recording of this video, we have almost 40 podcasts part of the community, and we've rejected closer to 50. we're pretty careful. We vet very much. And the reason for that vetting is because anyone who listens knows they're getting good quality content. That's something we want to be known for. And so people trust the Christian podcast community. Now, when we have this process, the first process, the inquiry form, if that goes through, we approve to move forward. We send you a longer application that has a lot more detail in it. And so we can get to know the person more and get more information, do more follow-up. After that, what we're going to do is schedule an interview where you get to meet with the administrators. We get to sit down with you, get to talk through things, get to know you better, make sure that there's a good fit. Notice our concern is that you're going to fit in well with the community that's already established. In fact, if you get past the interview, the next step is your podcast gets approved not only by the administrators of the Christian podcast community, but the board members at Striving for Eternity. After their approval, then it goes to everyone who's currently in the community. Everyone gets a chance to say, hey, go check this out, listen to their podcasts, see whether you think they're a good fit. Maybe you know them, maybe there's things you know, reasons they shouldn't join or should join, whatever. And we give it to the entire community to have some say. And after that, if approved, then we send out one more form to set up the website. And then after that, we send a contract as well. And then we will start to join you into the community once the website's done and the contract is signed. Now, there's two choices you would have: hosted or affiliated. Now, if you host with us, we are hosted technically through Blueberry. And so it's basically the entry for all podcasts is $20 a month. What does that cover you? Well, that gives you several things. One, it puts you on the Christian Podcast Community RSS feed. We have one feed that has everyone that's hosted with us. Why is that an advantage? Well, one of the things is we have some guys who speak internationally, myself, Justin Peters, and others who travel the world. And I could tell you that some of the podcasters know when I'm speaking at certain places. In fact, when I was in the Philippines speaking to about 1,500 people, at the exact time that I said, listen, folks, take out your phone and subscribe to the Christian Podcast Community right now. Well, they did that. In fact, many of our podcasts became in the top 10 in the Philippines for some time. My podcast was the number one podcast in the Philippines for about a month. Why? Because 1,500 people started downloading it. But what ended up happening? They listened to the Christian Podcast Community feed, so they get to hear all of them. And we have many people that just listen to that one feed so that they can get everything. Well, that's a benefit of being on that feed. What are some other benefits of hosting? Well, if you don't want to maintain a website, you don't have to. We maintain it for you. That's part of that cost. We're going to maintain that either way when you're hosting with us. It's in that cost of it. So if you want to have your own website, again, this is the difference between a network and a community. If you want your own website, go for it. See, a network sometimes can restrict you where you can't get your own website. You have to have everything go through them. We don't want those restrictions. You can have your own website and still host with us and put your feed up. And we actually have a web developer who will help you to set it up so that it's maintenance free for you to be able to get your stuff to just go, you post it onto our site and it automatically goes over to your site within an hour. That's some of the stuff that we do if you're hosting with us. Some other things, maybe you want to have a giveaway to help promote your podcast. If you host with us, then you get that included with that. We have basically a tool that we use on our website that allows for raffles and giveaways, and you can set that up. Very easy for us to set it up for you, and then you can do a giveaway. We have other things, different services that we look to do so that we have a tools like the script. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but different tools like that could have a cost with it. But we're using the power of joining together to get a reduced rate on some of these things so we can save money in areas like that. Now you say, well, look, $20 is more than I can afford. I don't think I'm going to have that big of a podcast. That's fine. You can still be affiliated with us. Now, when you're affiliated with us, you have your own website. You maintain that on your own. You post on that website, and we'll pull in to our website your episodes. That way, people that come to our website, and by the way, because of the backing of Striving for Eternity actually has a pretty good internet presence. And because of that, you're probably going to get spotted in there when people are doing searches for podcasts through that website. So that's an advantage of being affiliated with us because of the larger presence of the Striving for Eternity ministry. And so if you affiliate with us, there's going to be a one-time $50 fee. Why? Because we still need to set up our website, and we're going to set up the website in such a way that it pulls your information in so that you don't have to be posting in two places. Okay. So that's the difference between the hosted and the affiliate. That is one thing you have to make a decision at the time of the contract. So you have time to discuss it. And you can always change. We have some people that paid for hosting for a whole year. They've waited until that year was up and then moved over. We had some people, they had their own website and they decided, you know what, I don't want to be maintaining this. I'm going to get rid of it and just host it on christianpodcastcommunity.org. That's an option. We want to be flexible because we want to help you improve your podcast. That's our goal. We want to help you get your podcast promoted with the power of the community. That's our goal. If that's something that interests you, then you may be interested in the Christian podcast community. If it's not, that's okay. You don't have to be part of the community. There's no hard feelings. But we do want you to realize that we're pretty picky. And we're picky for a reason. We're picky because we want to replace all of the heretics that are in the top 10 of Christian podcasting with good Christian podcasts. So that's our goal. We want to see a lot of podcasts that improve both their content and their quality. And we have a lot of different ways of doing it. Some things we're thinking of doing. We're working on creating a Christian podcast community conference. Those who are part of the community would be the speakers doing live broadcasts or preaching. That's going to be something that's going to help everybody get to know some of the podcasts. So we try to find creative ways that we can help promote your podcast, and we encourage you to find creative ways to help promote everyone else's as well. Here's the simple thing. And I mentioned this a bit earlier, but if I have 10 people that are promoting your podcast, that's going to give a greater power than if it's just you promoting it. This is the power of community that helps. We also do things where we have a monthly podcast that we all do, where we all get together, and it's called Theology Throwdown. You can go check out some of the past episodes. And we get together and we discuss theology. We have differences. Yes, we are going to have differences. I happen to be Baptistic, and one of the other co-hosts who started this with me my co-host on So You Want to Be a Podcaster, one of the other administrators, she's the chief administrator, is Colleen Sharp of Theology Gals podcast. She is a Presbyterian. We're going to have obvious differences, but one of the things with the community is we can discuss those differences with love and charity. That's the thing we like to do. We actually have found we don't have too many differences. We have a lot of agreement. Now, I gave you the process to come in. I want you to know there's also processes to protect if someone needs to go out as well. In other words, if someone starts podcasting and they're saying things that are starting to affect your audience. Now, because we're not a network, there's no association between you and any other podcaster in the platform. That's the difference between a platform and a publisher. Okay. So do not feel that you have to be accountable for what anyone else says. But there are times where maybe someone's starting to teach something that's outside of Christian doctrine. Maybe they're starting to deny the Trinity or the deity of Christ or something like that. Or maybe they're starting to have a really harsh tone or whatever it might be. Well, if you have an issue with one of the other Christian podcast community members, what we encourage you to do is to go talk to them alone. Let them know your issue. If it can't be resolved, you bring in the administrators of the Christian podcast community. This may start sounding familiar to something. Matthew 18. If it can't be resolved there, the board of directors at Striving Fraternity will get involved. And if it still can't be resolved, we will hold a meeting with all the members of the community and say, let's have a discussion. Now, guess what? If someone has to leave, if it's decided, no, that person just has to go. I mean, they're denying the deity of Christ. Well, okay, that one's actually easy. It won't actually get to the community because we have a doctrinal statement you have to agree to. But if it is somewhere where someone has to go, the Christian podcast community has an obligation to take care of you and make sure we work with you to find new hosting to be able to do that. Now, the reality, we have never gotten even to step one with anybody. We have almost 40 podcasts right now, and there hasn't been anything like that. Why? I think it's because of the vetting process that we do. And that's why it's such a difficult process. And yes, it's a longer process you're going to have with others. It's also the reason why some people we have some podcasts that have been asked to join very large networks, and they've said no because they don't want to lose the control. But they don't mind joining us because we don't make them have to promote other podcasts that they don't agree with. So if you're Baptist and you really have an issue with Presbyterians, you may not want to promote Theology Gals. If you're really Presbyterian and you don't want to promote Baptists, you may not want to promote some of the others that are more Baptistic. Whatever the issues are, we're trying to build a community where we all work together. That's the goal. So if you're interested in being part of a community like this, then you may want to consider filling out the inquiry form for the Christian podcast community so we can get to know one another and see how we can help one another. I hope this has been informative and help you understand more about the Christian podcast community. If you want to check us out, just go to christianpodcastcommunity.org, or you could listen to all of our podcasts by subscribing to the Christian Podcast Community RSS feed. We're glad that you're interested. We're excited to see what you're producing of your content and how we come alongside you and help you be even better. We encourage you to strive to make today an eternal day for the glory of God.